Good evening and welcome. Tonight we are going to be going over the history and geography of the Bahamas. In my Countries of the World series, I am going in an order. Some of you have figured it out. And amazingly, counting this one, this and the next two countries I'm doing are amazing islands from different parts of the world, or island chains, I should say. So this is Island Chain Week, I suppose. We have at least a good week of island videos, and they're so beautiful and luxurious. But I think we're starting off with the most beautiful and luxurious of them all, the Bahamas. So I'll go over quick geography, then history, and then we'll flip through this book and I'll show you some beautiful pictures of the Bahamas. So as you can see, the Bahamas are located very close to Florida in the United States and to Cuba down here. It is this big, long chain of islands. There are 29 main islands and like over 4,000 different keys and islets and rocks. Obviously most of those are uninhabited. But I'll go over the main island groups here. So starting up here, we have Grand Bahama. This is a big tourist place mainly, along with Apico Island up here. The Apico Islands, there's a bunch of them. Over here we have the Bimini Islands, and this is Andros Island and all the islands associated with it. This would be the largest island in the Bahamas, and it's really naturally beautiful. It doesn't have a very large population because it's very kind of marshy and very rugged. It has like mangroves growing on it. It also has some really neat blue holes. I'm going to have a whole video about this island coming up in 2 days, so look out for that. Right here is New Providence. This island has the capital city of Nassau on it, and this is the most populated island, or the most populous island, I suppose. This is Eleuthera Island, which is mostly famous for its pink sand beaches, so luxurious. This is Cat Island. I don't think it's marked on here, but it has the highest point in the Bahamas on it. It's called Mount Alvernia. And it's not even that high. It's like 200 meters or something like that. It's like a hill, basically. There's San Salvador out there. Sorry, my voice is extra clicky tonight, apparently. These are the Exuma Islands. Great Exuma, and Little Exuma. Lots of little dotted islands. If you're familiar with the Fire Festival fraud scandal fiasco, that's where it was located. This is Long Island over here. We have a lot of different little keys down here, but over here we have Acklands Island. These are called like the outer islands because they're far away from like the main most populous touristy islands, but they're still absolutely beautiful. Very like rugged and forested, and lots of like coconuts and pineapples, things like that growing on it. We have Mayagüana. I butchered that. Mayagüana Island and Inagua Island. Or you can see there's Inagua National Park. Absolutely gorgeous. So many cool like tropical forests, lots of animals like parrots. There's hutias here. I think they're on Mayagüana Island. They're little cute, like if a rat and a gerbil were mushed together, that's a hutia. They're super cute. And as you can imagine, there are so many coral reefs. You can kind of see little outlines here. Coral reefs. So many different habitats for ocean life. Dolphins, sharks, humpback whales go by on the migration. Also, the Gulf Stream runs right by here, which is kind of like, it's like an underwater river where that water is much hotter than the ocean, and it creates the tropicalness of the Caribbean and of like Florida and this whole region of the world. It flows right by through here. So that is what makes the Bahamas so beautiful, and the weather so warm constantly, and all of that luxuriousness. The Bahamas is very famous for its tourism industry, with luxurious resorts and beaches, and many celebrities and royalty have houses in the Bahamas, like vacation houses. It's just very much a place to come and explore and relax and have luxurious vacations, at least before 2020 it was, at least. But this is also a big hurricane area, and we'll talk about it in its history. But hurricanes, actually it's a good segue, because the word hurricane comes from the language of the natives here in the Bahamas. So let's seg into that. The early people to settle in the Bahamas were the Taino people. They were an ethnic tribe, mainly known for being on what is now Hispaniola. It's covered up by the book here. It's where Haiti and the Dominican Republic are. They weren't quite at war with the Caribs, but they were greatly avoiding the Caribs. If you've seen any of my other videos that are set in this area of the world, I've mentioned the Carib people a few times. They were excessively violent and cannibalistic, and you just did not cross them. So many Taino people fled north to get away from these people, and they arrived here sometime between the 800s and the 1000 CE. And that group of Taino people came to be known as the Lucayan people, and populated the area and lived there, living their lives until the year 1492, when Columbus sailed the ocean blue. Sorry for my squeaky chair right here. Christopher Columbus touched down in the New World in the Bahamas. The island he landed on, he named San Salvador, so it's long believed that he landed on the island that's known as San Salvador now, but it's very debated. There's a couple of places it could have been, but nevertheless, Christopher Columbus came, and first time that part of Europe made contact with this part of the Americas. He made notes about the people here. They traded. It was, it wasn't violent, but it was just kind of more of a confusion that these two groups of people have never seen anything like the other before. And then Columbus sailed on past these islands to explore and exploit other peoples. The Treaty of Tordesillas in 1494, which basically divided up what lands the Spanish and the Portuguese were allowed to conquer. The Bahamas landed under the Spanish sphere of influence, which I suppose worked out because Columbus claimed the land for Spain once he arrived on it. But the Spanish didn't use these islands like they did for their other territories in the Caribbean and South America, because they were mainly looking for mineral resources like gold and silver and precious stones and all that, which the Bahamas does not have. So they used these islands to get free labor. So they would come and capture the Lucayans and send them off to Hispaniola and Cuba and other plantation sites around the area. And this devastated the Lucayan population, especially due to the diseases that the Spanish brought over. It nearly wiped out the entire people. I think at one point, where did I read that? There were only like 11 Lucayans left in the islands at one point. It was devastating for these people. So once that was done, the Spanish really had no need for these islands whatsoever. Tourism was not a thing back then. So they had no use for these absolutely gorgeous beaches or anything. So they just kind of left them be until the year 1648, when the English got involved. So the English snatched up these islands and, said they were part of them, but they didn't really do anything with them. They just claimed them because England loved claiming places at that time. The first English to settle the area in 1648 were a group of Puritans. They were sailing up from Bermuda, or down from Bermuda, and they landed here, and they named it Eleuthera Island after the Greek word for freedom. and they eventually moved on to New Providence, which they also named. And it just kind of became a place for, people seeking religious freedom, which they did not fare totally well. A lot of them left because, you can't really farm the same kind of crops that you can over in England or the colonies that would become the United States. So it was, plus not to mention like the hurricanes and all that. So it was not a very successful colony for the Puritans, but it did remain. Eventually in 1670, England granted the islands as properties of the lords proprietors of the Carolinas. So the lords that were overseeing what is now North and South Carolina in what is now the United States were also charged with taking care of these islands. And again, tourism was not a thing. You couldn't really grow much on it. It just had, some backward Puritans and some other native people struggling to survive on it. So they had really no reason to do anything with it. So they maintained it as best they could. Towns were established, what have you. But it was mainly used to attack the Spanish whenever the Spanish felt like attacking the British, because they were really going at it at this time in history. But it was also attacked by pirates who would come. These islands were perfect for wreckers, which were pirates that would lure ships near these craggy, rocky, corally islands, pretending that they were lighthouses, putting out lanterns. And once the ship crashed, they would board it and steal whatever they wanted. And many pirates came to the area and took over towns, and by the 18th century, this was a massive pirate haven. They even established their own Pirates Republic in Nassau, and were basically running the show in the Bahamas in a major way. So the British were not fans of this. They did not like they could not rein in all these pirates just living their best lives out on the Bahamas. So in 1718, this island chain was made a crown colony, and the king sent a man named Woodes Rogers to get the pirates out of here. And get the pirates out he did. He paid a lot of them off, told them, if you surrender, I'll give you land and money and I'll drop all the charges, but if you don't surrender, I will find you and I will kill you. All of it. So that was a very successful campaign in that he basically eradicated piracy in the Bahamas at that time. And towns started to spring up more legitimately. There were some brief occupations and some destructions, or like the Spanish came in and destroyed Nassau at one point. During the American Revolution, Nassau was occupied. Little things like that. This is a brief history. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but after the American Revolution, many loyalists in the colonies came here, and they brought their slaves with them. So all of a sudden, the population of the Bahamas sprang up into way more like the thousands, especially since there was double the number of slaves coming than were loyalists. And these loyalists established big, well, not big towns, but towns that were bigger than what were there before besides Nassau, and made them into like plantation towns where the slaves worked. But it wasn't long after that, in 1807, sorry, my cat is asleep in my lap and he's sliding off. There we go. I'll pull his butt back onto my lap. In 1807, Britain outlawed the slave trade. They didn't outlaw slavery, but they outlawed the slave trade. So if they had caught any ships transporting slaves, they would allow the slaves to resettle here on the Bahamas. And then after slavery is abolished, what was it, 1837? People were allowed apprenticeships to learn how to be free people and were given land. And also, now that slavery was totally abolished, pretty much any slave ship anywhere, if it was caught by the British, they would let the slaves live here, much to the chagrin of the Americans. It was actually a really interesting event in 1841. A ship called the Creole was carrying slaves from Virginia to New Orleans to sell them. And there was a slave revolt on the ship, and they steered it to Nassau, and all the slaves on the ship were freed. It's considered the most successful slave revolt in U.S. history. So as you can imagine, the population was a majority of black people of African descent from various parts of Africa, big mishmash. Also, some Seminole people from the native tribes down here would flee to the Bahamas, and there's still a, not a large, but a decent amount of white population. So to this day, the population is pretty varied. I mean, it is like 95% black, but there are a lot of minorities in the island. It was a big kind of cultural mix, I suppose. The first time any kind of economic prosperity came to the Bahamas was during the Civil War in the United States. The northern states blocked the Confederacy's ports, so they couldn't import or export anything in. So the Bahamas became blockade runners. Basically, they would sneak onto Confederate land at night, and they would exchange cotton for pretty much whatever the people in the southern states needed. They'd take the cotton back to the Bahamas, and then they'd sell it to England, because England was really suffering due to their lack of cotton from the blockade. So in that case, everyone went out, but it kind of defeats the purpose of blockading the Confederate harbors, but what have you. And they had another prosperity boom during the Prohibition movement in the United States, which was when the United States outlawed the creation, sale, and distribution of alcohol. So rum runners became a thing, where pretty much the same deal. People here would take their rum and alcohol. They'd land mainly in Miami. I think there's a map in here of it. And sell alcohol. And that created a big prosperity boom as well. And it was around this time that tourism started to become a thing. And it started off in that, people believed that fresh air and warm weather would cure diseases. So it started off as like, hey, if you have X disease, come on down here and relax by the ocean. And people who weren't ill were coming to relax by the ocean. This was really when the whole tourist movement really started in the 1920s, 1930s. An interesting fact only to me, because I have a personal fascination with the British royal family. I have since I was like 7 years old. Long story short, I got really obsessed with Princess Diana when I was a kid. I loved her. And I just found myself consuming everything about the British royal family. So I have all these facts in my head that are totally useless. But the former King Edward VII, who abdicated so that he could marry Wallis Simpson, who was an American, was like BFFs with a lot of Nazis, including Hitler. So when World War II broke out, he was just embarrassing to the British royalty and the British people in a variety of ways. So he was named governor of the Bahamas just to kind of get him like out of Europe, because at one point he was accused of spreading information to some of his friends, like accidentally, because he was buddies with them. He was still pretty buddies with some Nazi sympathizers and some outright Nazis here in the Bahamas, and said some pretty anti-Semitic things. But yeah, that, like I said, that's interesting only to me, basically. Just a little fact I have in my head that I can do nothing with. But anyway, in 1950, political parties were finally allowed in the Bahamas, so political parties were created. And in 1968, one of those parties, which was led by the Prime Minister Lyndon Pendling, started to move toward independence and putting that on the table, and Britain accepted it. And on July 10th, 1973, the Bahamas became independent, and they also are a part of the British Commonwealth, which is like a club of countries that used to be British colonies, and they just all kind of hang out in this club where Queen Elizabeth II is their monarch. And they have a governor general that represents the queen, but they are not like really controlled by them politically. They have their own government and prime minister and all of that. So I feel like I've done a lot of countries recently where once independence was gained, everything just sort of like fell apart and exploded. And thankfully the Bahamas is not one of those countries. They've done politically, they've done very well for themselves. And that's literally because they leaned heavily into the tourist industry and also like banking, if you know what I mean, banking for the rich and famous, offshore accounts, what have you. That also brought a lot of money to the country. And, you know, economically, the Bahamas are doing really well. And, yeah, it's just a very prosperous, lucky place. The only downside is that in 2019, Hurricane Dorian swept in up through here and absolutely devastated the Abaco Islands and Grand Bahama Island. It's horrendous looking at the pictures of what happened. Like whole towns were just wiped out. So the Bahamas is a place where global warming is going to greatly affect them in the future in terms of rising oceans, warming oceans. You know, the Bahamas used to have a big sponge industry, and it started to die off in like the 1920s because the sponges started dying. And the warmer the oceans get, the more coral is going to die. The more coral that dies, the more fish will leave or die. And, you know, the oceans are rising, hurricanes are getting stronger. So the Bahamas is a place that will really be affected by climate change in the future. We'll have to see how it looks in the future. But as of right now, it's a very, very beautiful place. Let me show you some pictures in here. The Bahamas. So gorgeous. Let me flip this carefully. I'm a little bit zoomed in. Look at this. Absolute paradise. It's so serene to just even like look at. Let's see what we got. Oh, so this is a really cool celebration they have in the Bahamas called Junkanoo. And it started off when like all the slaves and servants were given the days after Christmas off, and they were allowed to just celebrate. And so Junkanoo is still celebrated the day after Christmas through New Year's, and they have big parades and costumes like this. Look, here's a cool float for Junkanoo. And yeah, one remarkable thing about the Bahamas. Here's a political map of the Bahamas. We have some luxurious dining out like over the water. Can you see? Awesome. He's a very happy Bahamian. I should state that people from the Bahamas are Bahamians. It's just a thing. It's like Haitians are from Haiti. They're not like Haitians, they're Haitians. I just feel like in this corner of the globe, people have different names for themselves than the country's pronounced. But anyway. To a point. This is, I was going to say, it doesn't say, but this is the famous lighthouse that we're going to see later on. Or just one that looks like it. Let me see. It'll come up later. There's the physical map of the Bahamas. You can see there's Mount Alvernia, the highest point. There'll be a picture of it later. But you can see some of the other major cities like Marsh Harbor, Freeport, of course the capital, Nassau. This is in Lucayan National Park on Grand Bahama Island. So pretty. And some of the foresty areas on Grand Bahama Island. Shipping containers at Freeport. Here's the big lighthouse. The Hopetown Lighthouse, it says. Like a very traditional looking lighthouse. Of course, you can get lots of cool little knickknacks, it being like a tourist country, and some of the luxurious homes out on the boats. It's interesting looking at the houses in Bahamas. They look a lot like houses in California. It's really weird to see like the style of architecture I grew up in like a completely different environment. It's cool though. Look at all the fishies in the water. There's the coral. Oh, here's the pink sand beach. Look at this. That's awesome. So it explains here that it comes from the crushed up shells of these sea creatures that have pink shells. So once it gets crushed up to sand-like size, it becomes a pink beach, and it's beautiful. This is a blue hole. So, what was it? There's like 200 of them on Andros Island. Is that what it is? Did I read that over here? I read it somewhere. Oh yeah, Andros Island has more than 200 blue holes. We'll learn more about these in a few days. We'll explore what's underneath the water there. Some wild donkeys. And some hurricane winds. Beautiful hibiscus flower. And the national tree, it says it's Lignum vitae, which, if you know Animal Crossing, this is where hardwood comes from. And these are some mangroves. It looks like looks like a little nurse shark. The national flower is the yellow elder. This is from a bottle brush tree. And what are these? Crepe myrtle, I think. Not familiar with that flower. So you can imagine with all the pirates and what have you, there's lots of little sunken treasures everywhere. So it becomes little fish and coral habitats now. There's a barracuda and a hammerhead shark. I love their faces. They always look very concerned. A beautiful parrot. Looks like he's having a snack. Beautiful sea turtle. Is this a hawksbill? Hawksbill called it. I think that's like my favorite kind of turtle. My cat's butt is falling off again. Hold on. He's like passed out asleep. There we go. An Allen's Key rock iguana. Severely endangered, it says. Oh, here's the moment where Europeans meet the natives here. And what did it? Oh, a bell. They're like, check out this bell. And that guy, I think, is more concerned about the huge sword there. What are they looking at over here? I think they're just talking. Or attempting to communicate, because they couldn't really, like, talk, you know. Here we go. This is Columbus's voyage in 1492. Coming this way, landing somewhere around here, while going back off, very famously landing in Hispaniola. And here's what the Lucayans' homes looked like. It says these are replicas. So obviously they're not still standing today if they're made of sticks like that. Some Spanish ships arriving from being spotted offshore. This is Sir Robert Heath. He was like one of the first people in charge of the islands back when like no one lived there basically. He's got a weird looking hat. He looks like a hammerhead shark. Some pirates boarding the ship. Some famous pirates. Is this... Yeah, I think it's... This picture's in my pirate book. I think it's, yeah, Anne Bonny and Mary Read. Famous female pirates. This is Woodes Rogers, who got rid of the pirates. Obviously, that's a statue of him. It's not him. My goodness. Some of the sugarcane plantations that came to be after the Loyalists brought their slaves to the Bahamas. This is a picture from 1856 in the market. And where is this? Oh, these are blockade runners going to or landing in Charleston to get some cotton in exchange for other goods. Here it is, rum running during Prohibition. So here from West End in Grand Bahama, they would sail all the way to Miami, and here in the Bimini Islands, sailing there to Miami to sell some alcohol, make some money. Here are some sponges. This is a sponge merchant. So sponges are a type of coral that obviously were used for sponges. Obviously they're not being used for sponges today, so that we're not killing off creatures just to scrub our dishes with. It seems a little much. This is a picture from 1955 in the market. This is Lyndon Penzling, the first Prime Minister of the Bahamas. And These are some British guys with some Bahamian guys negotiating independence. Running the government. Here's Perry Christie, who was Prime Minister when this book came out. There's the Parliament building, very characteristic pink. A lot of buildings in the Bahamas are painted this pink color. And there's, of course, Queen Elizabeth II. Or it looks more like Queen Victoria, actually, but not positive there. The national flag. I love this part. Let's read about it. It says, the Bahamas has flown its own national flag since independence from Britain in 1973. It consists of a black triangle and a horizontal gold stripe between two aquamarine stripes. The black triangle, which is at the mast, symbolizes the power and energy of the nation's citizens. The gold stripe in the middle represents the sun, and the two aquamarine stripes stand for the islands' surrounding oceans. Here's a map of Nassau. You can see the wharf here. And this is Fort Fincastle, which is a famous old-timey part of the city. The Queen's Staircase leads up to this. A very famous historical part of the town. This is just an example of what judges look like. Very, very British. What is she making? A basket? Yeah. Awesome. Beautiful. Of course, cruises are a big thing back when cruises were a thing. Relaxing on the beach. And there's gorgeous resorts. Have you ever heard of the Atlantis Resort? That's in the Bahamas. And salt is one of the things that is mined, one of the resources in the Bahamas. And if you use Morton salt, that comes from the Bahamas. Looks like a textile factory making clothes. Here's a Bahamian dollar, $5 bill. Their currency looks like bananas, bananas, bananas. Yum, yum, yum. A resources map. You can see lots of fruits, sugarcane, lots of fish, lots of shellfish. There's the salts down here. These are conch shells. Well, you know, I've heard it both ways. I've heard conch shells and conch shells. I think it's conch shells, but that might be a thing that, like, depending on what part of the world you're in is how it's pronounced. But it's a shellfish. You can see him. Looks like he's just guided one right there. And then you can resell the shells as well. They're beautiful shells. A mix of peoples like I talked about. We've got, oh, this is a population map. You can see where a lot of people live here on Grand Bahama. And then you can really see how populated New Providence is by, it's all purpley and red. It means a lot of people live there. 70% of the population lives in New Providence. The Albert Lowe Museum. It says a little historic house. And this is a Junkanoo celebration. It says she's of Chinese descent. And this is a Haitian woman getting her hair braided. There's a lot of Haitians that live in the Bahamas looking for work because there's always jobs in the tourism industry. A hammock. So that's another word from the Lucayan people. A hammock comes from their word. You're having a giggle over something. And then, of course, it being previously owned by the British, it is a Christian majority nation. The Anglican Church is it the biggest one? I think there's a chart over here. Oh, Baptist is actually way bigger than the Anglicans. We've got church choirs over here. This is a little chapel that's on top of Mount Al. I just went to Alvernia. And talks about here that the priest who built it carried all the rocks up by hand and built it himself. There's another pink building. This is an Anglican church. And, you know, voodoo is still practiced. It being populated by former Africans. They brought their religious beliefs to the island. And this bark is used for healing medicines, still something that's practiced in some of the more rural parts of the Bahamas. He's playing the accordion. Awesome. Oh, that's a great smile. And what is this called? The bend and scrape style of music, where you basically scrape against metal to make the sound. Here's the Baha Men, famous for Who Let the Dogs Out. I think everyone knows that song. This is the National Art Gallery of the Bahamas. I'm sure there's gorgeous art in there. Look at this. Isn't that beautiful? Look at all those colors and all the styles in there. I love this drawing. This is by Stan Burnside. That's so beautiful. And I like this art too. Here's the artist, Chantal E.Y. Bethel. Isn't that a beautiful painting? I love that. Look at the flowers and then a beautiful girl. So pretty. This is Wendy Coakley Thompson, an author from the Bahamas. Alfonso Smith, another author. Obadiah Smith is a poet. And playwright Winston Saunders. Lots of famous people. Here's Ernest Hemingway. The Old Man in the Sea is inspired by the Bahamas. He caught a tuna this big. And Sidney Poitier is from the Bahamas, right? Or he's of Bahamian heritage. I think he's from the Bahamas. But that's President Obama giving him the Presidential Medal of Freedom. Persia White, an actress from the Bahamas. And this is the Disney movie 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea that they filmed in the Bahamas. James Bond movie, For Your Eyes Only. It's Roger Moore. This is Michael Thompson, a basketball player from the Bahamas. And famous track athlete. This is Tonique Williams-Darling. She won a gold medal at the Olympics in Athens. Mark Knowles, tennis player. Oh, doesn't this look fun? Oh, this looks so relaxing. This is like one of my ideal summer days, just like in the water with your friends hanging out. That's the best. I love swimming. Playing some leapfrog. That's awesome. Working hard at school. Some good friends. So cute. And look at the lighthouse all lit up for the holidays. Very old building. Look how rugged it is from like the wind, the sea wind whipping at it. Some conch fritters. Doesn't that sound good? I'm like a shellfish person. I love seafood, and shellfish is like my favorite form of seafood, so I'm all about it. Some cricket, because former British colony. Mac and cheese. That's like the best way to make mac and cheese. You have to bake it in a big pan, get it all crunchy on the top. That's the best. There's a conch shell. Isn't that beautiful? Put it to your ear and hear the ocean. Racing and triathlon and windsurfing. Another really popular sport. Oh, that's the end of our book. So that's it for the Bahamas tonight. I will have 2 more videos for you about the Bahamas coming out in the next 2 days. So if you haven't subscribed already, be sure to do so you don't miss out. Be more relaxing island fun. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you found this video relaxing and educational. And I hope that you have a very good night. Good night. The loud car outside says good night too. Good night, good night, good night, good night. Good night. Good night, good night, good night, good night, good night. That was my cat waking up and shaking.